the Design Study Centre on Bristol's Park Road. The man behind it is Ken Stradling. He's known as the Incidental Collector. Let's go inside and find out why. So Ken Stradling, they call you the Incidental Collector. Why is that?
Well, I never set out to build up a collection as such. If you know Kettle's Yard in Cambridge, the chap who set that up, when they asked him how he set it up, he said, well, my wife and I just love lovely things around us, and when we could afford them, we bought them, and this is really how it starts with me, you know. And of course, I had the advantage of running the Bristol Guild at the time with regular exhibitions, so I saw a lot of new things coming onto the market and things, and buying them for the Guild. So that's how it started up.
This is the first piece that you ever bought.
But this was before I was in. This was a pre-war piece, and the reason I bought this piece was that my mother was brought up in Yatton, very close to Clevedon, and in those days, if you wanted a nice wedding present for somebody, you either went to Clevedon Court itself or to Challicom's, which was a store in Clevedon, which was the agent for it, and bought a piece of Elton pottery made by Sir Edmund Elton, who was one of the turn-of-the-century artist potters at that time. I bought it in 1938 when Oldbury Court mansion was being demolished, and there was a sale of contents, and that was my first purchase, and long before I thought of the Guild or anything else.
So I'm intrigued. What made you want to buy this particular piece?
Well, we had some Elton pottery at home, which my mother had bought, so I knew Elton, and he was local, and I just loved it. I love the glaze, and I love the look of it. But when I showed it to my father, his immediate reaction was, "Fine, that'd do just for my ashes." And I said, "Bloody hell, no way." So he never had it.
He's not in there then?
He's not in there.
When you bought this, did you have any idea that it was going to be the start of a lifetime of collecting?
No, not at all, no. I bought it as a nice thing, and because I knew quite a bit about Elton pottery, and I think it's a good pot. I like the glaze, and it's a good shape.
Is there one particular thing that draws you to an object and think, well, I must add that to the collection?
I don't know, it's just an eye I've developed for what I consider good design. But I should explain that my first love was glass more than anything else, because when I came to the Guild Festival, the design centre of Europe was Scandinavia, of course, and when we were importing Scandinavian furniture in those early days after the war, a lot of glass was coming in at the same time, because in Sweden there were 15 or maybe more glass works in southern Sweden, and we used to buy quite a lot from. So that was my main interest. But my wife taught art at Clifton High School, and she used to use clay just to show children how to handle clay and how to mold and play with clay. And she discovered that there were a lot of people who were breaking away from the Leach tradition of throwing pots and hand building, and so she said we must get involved with these people, and so she introduced me to the people from the Central School, Dan Arbide, Jenny Lowndes, Ian Old and Robin Welsh, and we became very close friends with those, especially Dan Arbide, and we represented him for a long, long time until he died a few years ago.
Now, Ken, you mentioned glass, and here's the next piece that we're going to look at. And of course it is glass, so tell me about it.
Well, the first time I went to Copenhagen, for example, with my wife, the purpose was to see a glassworks there called Hummergaard, because we were selling Hummergaard glass. But this isn't a piece from there, this is a piece from Czechoslovakia, because in 1961, that's right, 1961, it was the first year you could get a visa to go to Czechoslovakia, as it was. We were the first people to apply for visas to Czechoslovakia. So we went there in the very early days. Now, why we went to Czechoslovakia was the fact that it has a great reputation for glass, and I wanted to see glass more and so forth. But this is a piece which was being shown at that time because it's designed by a woman called Zina Strobakova, and she designed a range which is very similar to this, which was shown in the Milan Triennale of that year. And it's such an unusual piece of glass, so delicate, and it's my, well, certainly one of my favourite pieces of glass. There's no doubt about it.
Is it now? Can I ask you a bit about going to Czechoslovakia? I mean, very early days of people from the West going there. What was it like when you arrived?
It was very strange, very strange. You could only get a visa for as long as you booked a hotel. Well, we didn't want to stay in Prague all the time, so we only booked a hotel for 3 nights. And then we wanted to go over to the Tatra Mountains, which was right to the east. And when we said we wanted to do it, they said, oh, okay, that's all right. You'll be able to get you extend your visa when you get there. But the extraordinary thing is, when we got to Prague, we immediately went to the police headquarters, which was a big open hall with 3 doors on each side and people standing around, and no queues or anything. You thought, what in the hell goes on here? And then you realized that you had to estimate which door would open next and all rush to the door. And we got the hang of that. But the most extraordinary thing, and if this was written in a novel, you wouldn't believe it. I was standing there in this very strange setup, and I was talking to my wife, and I suddenly felt a hand on my back. And this chap, a tall chap, said to me, he said, aren't you the managing director of the Bristol Guild? And wasn't that extraordinary? He'd been to Poland, and he suddenly found in Poland he could come back through Czechoslovakia. He just realized that. So he thought, well, I'll come back through Czechoslovakia. And I'd never spoken to him before. He just recognized me from the shop. So that was my unusual experience.
So in amongst all these rather strange experiences, you found this beautiful piece of glassware.
In Prague itself.
Yes.
They had some lovely shops in Prague.
So when you look at it now, it brings back all those memories, I suppose.
Oh, it does. It's full of memories. That's why it has this extra quality to it. I just fell in love with it and had to have it.
Now, Ken, we go from a beautiful piece of 1961 Czechoslovakian glass to this piece here. What on earth is it? Tell me about it.
Well, it's a piece by Sam Smith, and I bought it from the initial exhibition which the Arnolfini had when they opened in the Triangle, because the first position for the Arnolfini was the Triangle before they moved to their present premises. And Sam Smith was a toy maker and did a lot of very sophisticated toys and colourful toys, and he loved playing with ideas and had a great sense of humour. And this is one called Bathing Hut, for example, and you turn all the knobs round and you can see them coming out. But there's one who's very shy and she won't come out. and there's one already out there. So if you close them all up, you get this.
Ah, you get bathing.
You get bathing, and then you can turn them around.
It's a lovely piece. Was Sam Smith a local chap or?
Came from Southampton originally.
Yeah.
And very much interested in boats, because he's probably better known for the boats that he painted, toy boats, this kind of thing. It's kind of folk art, sophisticated folk art. But the trouble is, in this country, you haven't got the tradition for folk art as you have in Eastern Europe and America. And he really only became well known when he went to America and established a reputation in America. So when he came back in the 70s, he had quite a big following and so forth. And he had 1 or 2 very good exhibitions. There was one very famous exhibition they had at the museum here in Bristol at that time. But this was the one I bought, actually. The first piece I ever saw of his work at the Arnolfini in '61. I'm very fond of it.
What appealed? What about it appealed to you?
Just the fun of it and the colour of it and so forth. And it's a fun piece.
Yes. And is it one of your favourite pieces that you collected over the years?
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, especially favourite because it was one of the first ones. In '61, the same year with the glass piece, it's one of my first. So the ones we're looking at now are very early additions to my collection,
So Ken, the next piece from your collection, this rather fine-looking bowl.
It is a fine-looking bowl and one of my favourite pieces of pottery. It's by Sam Hill, who went to the Royal College, and they didn't like his idea of his style of painting at all. So he transferred from the pottery department, from the painting department to the pottery department and started making pottery. And then he met his wife there, who came from Switzerland. They married, and during the war they were in America, and he made quite a reputation for himself as a potter in America, and came back in 1945. And he took over the pottery at Dartington, which had been built before the war for Leach. But Leach, in the meanwhile, decided not to go to Dartington, but to go to St Ives. So the pottery at Dartington was empty, and he took it over when he came back in 45. And so he was potting there in 46 and doing some pottery in London at the same time. And I think he would have been one of the greatest potters of the generation, because he had this natural gift. He was transferring his painting and his drawing onto pots and so forth, and doing it with such a freshness and a quick, natural painting that he was doing things like Picasso did 10, 15 years later. And I think I'm probably better than Picasso transferred his paintings onto pots.
Do you think that his time in America had a big influence on his art?
Not at all. He influenced America.
Did he?
He led to just reverse there.
Ah.
And they'd never seen anything like it, you know, when he was there. And he taught at Ann Arbor University in New York, and was very successful there for about 5 years.
Ken, did you ever meet Sam Hill?
No, I would love to have met him, but unfortunately I didn't, because he died very young, at the age of 39. He'd just gone to open up the pottery at Dartington with Marion Dutrey, his Swiss wife, and he was involved with a car crash, and a van went into his van, and all the pottery that he was carrying was destroyed, and he was killed in the accident. It was so sad, because she was pregnant at the time, and she had done some training with him as a potter, and so she managed to carry on the pottery for many years, and we represented her here at the Bristol Guild. And
did she emulate his style?
No, not at all, no. She was producing tableware, which was very popular at the time, because just after the war people wanted colour, and there were a lot of studio potters doing tableware, this kind of thing, and she was one of them. And she's been my great friend, and we have been agents for her all through the time. And she's still alive at the age of 101, living in a home at Totnes. And she was potting up to the age of 97, I should think.
And would you have sold her tableware in the Bristol Guild?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, a lot of it. And then after the tableware, she then started doing very fine porcelain, and we also sold the porcelain too. But she was a great potter.
Kenneth, this is an intriguing piece. First, can I ask you first of all, what's it made of?
It's made of wood.
Is it?
It's just an empty box for all intents and purposes. But it's one of my favourite pieces. I bought it at the Medici Gallery in London, probably in the 70s or early 80s, when the man who made this, Howard Raybould, was very well known in the craft world, working in wood, did lovely framed mirrors and all sorts of things. But this is one of my favourite pieces. And we sold some of his work for some time, but only in limited quantities, because it was quite expensive, and he was very much in demand at the time. And then suddenly he seemed to disappear. After about 15 years or something, we couldn't get in touch with him. At any rate, we did get in touch with him a few years ago and found that he'd semi-retired to the south of France with his family. And I said to him, are you doing any work now? Is there any other work we could buy from you? And he said, no. He said, I've got a few pieces. And I did buy one piece from him. And he said, I'm not really doing anything, the French don't like my work, so I've just retired now. I'm enjoying the south of France.
He seems very phlegmatic about it.
He was. A lovely man, actually, yeah. Can I ask you first of all, what's it made of? It's made of wood.
Is it?
It's just an empty box for all intents and purposes. But it's very, very
So Ken, we began with the very first piece that you bought in 1938, and this is the final piece we're going to look at. And this brings us right up to date. What a superb, stunning piece of glassware this is.
Well, it is, and people keep saying to me, are you still buying? And I thought, well, I am buying, but I'm buying just one or two really significant pieces rather than spreading the interest more generally. And this is the first piece that I came across that I thought I really ought to have that piece. It's a piece by the Finnish designer Timo Sapanivo. A similar piece was sold 4 years previously in Paris by Philips, and they always refer to them as comparable piece, and I saw the illustration of it, and it was a comparable piece. When I saw this illustrated in the catalogue, I thought, I've got to have that. I'm very pleased to have got this because it's by one of the top Finnish designers, and being made in Venini in Venice, which was one of the top glassworks. Having just shown my first acquisition, this is my last one for the moment.
Yes. What do you think your 1938 self would have thought of this, had he had the chance to buy it then?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Do you think you'd have been impressed?
Yeah, I think so, yes. I'm sure he would, yeah. I think when you see, a good piece of whatever period or whatever style, you do recognize it intuitively, really. It may not be to your taste, but you know it's a good piece. And that has everything about it which says it's a very significant piece to me, anyway. There's nothing in the case here, nothing behind glass or anything. Everything can be handled, because I don't think you can appreciate anything really unless you can handle it. And okay, sometimes somebody drops something and breaks, well, that's life, isn't it? But I'm not prepared to accept that. And the other point is, of course, that we haven't got room for all the stuff that we have in the collection, because in the collection there are about 2,000 items altogether. And of course, about another quarter of the collection is at my home where I live in Hot Wells. So when I depart, there will be quite a bit more.